Hello, I had an interesting question come up today and I wanted to show a demo for. The question was, how do you look up a ID using a name when you do an insert? And well, there's a number of ways to go. Let me show you the best way. So I'm going to use a database module 04DB, and it's got a table called categories in it with one value. So the one row is category ID 1 and category name is category 1, cat 1. Now when I do an insert statement into the products table, you can expect the products table to have a product name, a category, foreign key, and in this case standard product price. So since the product A is going to be of category 1, I would put category 1 in there and the values will go in as normal, exactly as you would suspect. There's a foreign key relationship, so if I try to put in a 2, I should get an error message, and I do. Oops, got an error message because it violates unique constraint. But this one violates foreign key constraint. That's exactly what it's supposed to. The problem is that in real life, people have a hard time remembering the IDs for things, but they have a much easier time remembering the names. So humans like names, computers like IDs. What are you going to do? Well, one way to kind of mitigate this is to try to combine your statements. So I might go through and say, okay, I want to declare a variable for the category name, and just put a subquery when you do your insert. Now, I know that it'll be cat 1. So I might do that, but of course if I'm going to do this repeatedly, I'd want to make a variable. So if I do this, it does work. Oops, it does work if I highlight the whole code. It looks up the ID for me. And it puts in the ID as it's supposed to. So you use a subquery for that. That is one way to do it. And that way the human can just configure the name. In fact, you might even change the insert so you pass in the a name somehow. Like if I make a stored procedure, I might make the stored procedure so that you pass in not the category ID, but you pass in the name, and then inside the stored procedure I do the lookup. That's what people sometimes do, but it's not really your best choice. For one thing, there could be a lot of reasons why I want to look up a category ID or product ID or whatever it's going to be. So a better choice is something we haven't really talked about much, and that's using a user-defined function, a custom function. And that would look like this. I create a function, give it some kind of name. I called it get category ID. Actually, I should change the name to something a little bit better. Let's see, how about select? And then you give me a category name, and I will go through and do the select statement for you, picking up the category ID. So you give me a name, I find the ID, then I return the ID. So let's see, select. See if it works. It does. Now if I put in something that doesn't exist, I get a 0 back. But as long as I put in something that exists, I'll get back the ID. Now when I use a stored procedure, or excuse me, when I use my insert, I can just parameterize this and just call that function. So I'll declare a variable, set the default value of the variable, and use that to do my insert. Oops, gotta have a, let's go C. There we go. Now, I don't really want to modify my stored procedure to contain this code. It's tempting, but that's not really what I do. In other words, I don't want to make the stored procedure pass in a category name. That violates the relationship it has with the actual underlying products table, which doesn't have a category name column, it has a category ID column. And that can be confusing. I used to do that, but over time I realized that it didn't work out as well as I thought. So this new way of doing things is better. You still want them to pass in a category ID, and the actual code doesn't change inside the Sprock where you insert name, category ID, and price. It's going to be different after I make this stored procedure. Oops. Is that when I execute the stored procedure, I'll be able to use my function. Go to execute it, and I would, let's see, execute the name of the stored procedure. And then all these. And so we need the product price, or product name, prod. I think we just did D. C. Oh, looks like we're ready for D. And category ID. But we want to use our function. Actually, let me get it working first. So 1, and then price is equal to 9.99. Okay, so I'm going to test this because I got to show you something else. You'll see that it works. Okay, so life is good there. Select statement. Now this is something I wish Microsoft would make a little easier. But when we go to execute it, doctor it just a little bit. What I want to do is I want to use my new function. So have select category ID. Pass in cat1. And you can see it's kind of unhappy with me here. Expecting a single quote or select or something like that. Well, that's kind of weird. So select. Now if I try to run this, category ID is not recognized as a built-in function name. Yo dot. Now it works. This is weird. You have to include DBO on a function call that returns a single value. If it returns a table of values, you don't have to deal with that. I don't know who thought that one up, but whatever. Okay, so now we got it working. The problem is that when I go and try to execute it like this, it worked up fine on my declaration statement above, but it doesn't work fine here. So now the good news is in an application they will be able to call that and make that work. But anyway, what we have to do is we have to declare a variable up here. And use that function to capture the variable. Because that works. And cat ID. So a little extra work, but not too much, just an extra line of code. In fact, quite often what you see in real life is that people will go through and bundle up a bunch of different parameters up here, set them, and then have them be used down as the arguments for the parameters passing into the stored procedure. That's a common thing. But this gives it a lot more functionality for a little extra effort. and this would be the recommended way of doing it. It's because that lookup function is something that could be quite handy for a variety of places, so you want to write the code and use it once, use it many times, and that would be better than also violating the relationship that the insert sproc has to the actual underlying table. That hopefully that answers any questions that people have about that. And thanks for bringing it to my attention. Take care.